Quarterbacks, folks, this is the way the world works. When I first started in this business 30 years ago, we didn't have the internet. I mean, seriously, I had to read newspapers, the AP Wire. I can do my prep for this show in half the time I used to. Everything's on my phone. I can have a staff. We can find quotes, find video, everything in life's easier. That's why they have Silicon Valley. That's why we have technology to make your life easier. In the NBA, it's easier to score. You can't hand check people. In hockey, it's easier to score. You can't grab people. That's what sports should be. Sports should be not for the mediocre player. So all sports should be designed to elevate the best players. So they're free to score goals. That's the way sports should be. You don't build it for the middle-class athlete. You build it for the stars and allow them to be stars. You don't want people clutching and grabbing Kobe Bryant in his prime. That's why it's interesting. The New York Giants passed on drafting a quarterback for Eli Manning, knowing full well that if you look at the rules in the NFL, it's all quarterback. So Sam Darnold, he can win now. Baker Mayfield can win now. Josh Rosen this weekend can win now. Josh Allen. They passed on all of them. That's why I said when Odell Beckham came out and said what he said, it's the elephant in the room. Eli Manning's an iPhone 6. It's got name value. You can still make calls on it. But when you go to the Apple store and you compare it to the other iPhones, it looks outdated. And to me, all Odell Beckham did is mention the elephant in the room. Yeah, he didn't say Eli was terrible, but he talked about what everybody in the world's afraid in New York to talk about. The media won't talk about it. The owner won't talk about it. The GM won't talk about it. It's going to be rough sledding here, man, because Darnold's going to win a lot of games for the Jets. And Baker's going to win games for Cleveland. And Josh Rosen's going to win a lot of games for Arizona. And with that, we bring in BRYAN COX, who not only played for a Super Bowl champ, multiple Pro Bowler, he coached on 5 different teams, including, by the way, it should be noted, the Jets and the Browns. So you didn't like the whole Odell Beckham. You're old school. You don't like players yapping.
Well, the biggest thing is, one, there should have been something said to Odell in training camp about we don't do interviews without the permission of the PR department here. And I fought, in my opinion, Pat Shermer because it falls into the leadership or lack thereof that I talked about when he got the job.
So you didn't buy into Pat Shermer?
No. All you have to do is look at his record. You know, when you look at his win-loss record, and then you look at the fact that he is not a confrontational coach. When you have guys that speak out, you need to be able to go to them, and if there's a confrontation that needs to take place, you need to confront it.
Okay, you were on 5 staffs. Who is a confrontational coach you liked?
I like Mangini.
He's confrontational.
Yeah, he'll go and he'll bring it up and he'll say, "Hey, we got to talk about this." Dan Quinn is a guy that'll bring it up.
Atlanta.
I mean, he's not always just kind of sneaky. He kind of expects for the coaches.
Was Belichick confrontational?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah.
But Pat Shermer to you is non-confrontational, so therefore, when Odell Beckham says that, nobody confronts him on it.
Well, the biggest thing is not only do they not confront him about it. When Pat Shermer was at the press conference, he said, "Go ask BJ about it. Talk to Odell." You're the head coach. We're talking to you about it. You have to make the decision on this. There's nothing to go talk to him about. There should have been a fine or something in place to prevent Odell from having that interview.
By the way, you also said you thought there could be a Philadelphia. You've been really good on the NFC East. You also said, watch out for Philadelphia. Parades, everybody's writing a book. It looks like a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover.
It's a hangover. And, the biggest thing is John DeFilippo not being there. Their offense doesn't look the same.
It doesn't look the same.
It doesn't look the same.
Frank Reich is now the coach of the Colts. DeFilippo is where?
Minnesota. Coordinator.
So they lost their 2 offensive guys. Both left.
Right. And when you look at their offense now, they brought Mike Groh in from Chicago from a staff who had gotten fired, and they passed over Deuce Staley and made him the pass game or the run game coordinator, made Al go to coordinator. To me, it would have been the simplest thing to do what Kansas City has done with Eric Bieniemy and make Deuce Staley the coordinator because he's been there, he's been in the system, and then Doug Peterson would help him because he works with the quarterback anyway. That would have been the simple solution to me.
When you watch him, Carson Wentz isn't playing poorly. It's not that. They're just not the same offense.
But the receivers are not catching the ball. He's not getting protected as well. He's getting hit a lot more. They don't look the same. They don't look like they play with the urgency. They don't look like they play with the zip and the zeal that they played with last year. It looks like a different ball club.
By the way, let's go to stay in the NFC East with the Dallas Cowboys. Jason Garrett got a lot of heat, but you are going to defend him.
I defend him. Here's my point. Okay, 2 weeks prior, Indianapolis coach went for it on 4th down, didn't get it. Everybody crucified Frank Reich. You fast forward to the game, Dallas on 3rd and 1, they get a ball to Ezekiel Elliott. He gets stopped. So why would I go for it on 4th down? On the 40-yard line of my opponent, that if I don't get it, they're going to get 30 yards and get a first down. I'm going to play it by the book. I'm going to kick it, pin the offense down, which Houston caught the ball on the 10-yard line. Hopkins just made a phenomenal catch to move them in the field goal range. So, to me, it was the right play. You don't take a chance at that point unless you're trying to lose the game.
You know what's funny about this? So, Garrett's getting crushed for not going for it, Brian. Sean McVay went for it, but
there's an asterisk.
He wasn't going to go for it.
Exactly.
Sent the punt team in.
And nobody's crucified Pete Carroll for calling a timeout.
So, McVay's natural instinct, the gunslinger, with Todd Gurley, with a great young quarterback,
Goff was to punt.
With 2 great possession receivers, was to punt.
Right.
That most coaches go by the book, and the book is like, don't. If you don't get it, 2 first downs, and Houston walks out with a win.
And I'm not going to get at Frank Reich, but I'm going to say this. Frank Reich stood up there and defended, we're not playing the tie. Well, what are you planning to do, lose? Because oftentimes when you screw up as a head coach and you make a mistake and it doesn't work out, you screwed your team. Nobody crucified him, but they crucifying Garrett for doing the right thing, and it ended in a bad result. But that's what you do in that situation. You don't get a game away at that time.
Yeah, fans tend to look at the result, but there's generally a book on how to do things and how not to do things.
Fantasy football is screwing real football up because people that play fantasy football, they're invested now, and when they lose a game, all they know is, I lost money, you cost me a championship. But there are real consequences, and people's lives and jobs are at jeopardy when you get people that go on and say, Jason Garrett ought to be fired. Now, no, man, come on now. You're playing with that man's livelihood. Because at the end of the day, he did the right thing.
You've coached with the Jets, Browns, Dolphins, Bucks, and Falcons. If you coach the Steelers today, what would you suggest to the GM and the owner to do with Le'Veon Bell?
I would not allow him back. Period. You can't play for us anymore. Because here's the idiotic thing. You coming back week 7 because you say, I'm tallying up or trying to figure out how many hits my body can take. Okay? When has $14 million been a bad thing for a football player to play? And regardless of how many hits you take or whatever, I can't depend on you as a teammate or as ownership right now if I'm the Steelers saying, how do we know you're going to get here and not get a couple paychecks and then quit again? James Conner's been playing well enough that Ben Roethlisberger came out today and say he should get the carries anyway. To me, I'm moving on from Le'Veon Bell from this point forward. I'm trying to get ready with James Conner because next year he's going to be my feature back anyway. I'm going to get him the experience. And then if I'm another team that's contemplating signing Le'Veon Bell, how can I, in good conscience, give him the kind of money that he's looking for when he's not dependable? You can't count on him because if he's doing it to the Steelers, when he gets paid, what is he going to do to your organization? He might never show up.
But you do it for Todd Gurley, though, because
Todd Gurley showed up. Todd Gurley went to work. He didn't negotiate in the media. He went out there and did it. You can't argue his numbers.
Never been suspended.
Never been suspended. You can't argue his numbers, and you can't argue the type leader he is, the person he is. You can't say the same for Le'Veon Bell. He's been late. His teammates have come out against him now. He's down there doing rap concerts and promoting and on all these tours. And while we're up here putting in work, as a teammate of his, if it were me, I would be so uncomfortable. I'm not in a position that I would say that I would wholeheartedly welcome him back without. He would have to do some explaining. He would have to really show me. It's like a relationship, okay? if you hurt a woman and you go back to that woman, it ain't never the same because she never trusts you the same. I don't trust him, so I'm like a woman in this situation. I could never trust him again.
That's interesting. How about the Chiefs?
The Chiefs.
Now, I would say,
because
you've been very brutally honest, so you probably think all of us are going too crazy on the Chiefs.
No, I'm absolutely not. But what I am willing to point out is 2 years ago when you watched the Chiefs, everybody said, Doug Peterson is doing a great job. Andy Reid, this Doug Peterson offense. Last year was Matt Nagy, got him a job. You know, and now Eric Bieniemy is doing the job, and you don't hear anything about Eric Bieniemy as offense coordinator. You hear Andy Reid's offense now. They're not giving that man credit. That man has been the running back coach there. He's been in a position where Andy Reid is bringing him along. He doesn't have the experience working with quarterbacks. Andy Reid is taking a more hands-on approach with the quarterback position. But you got to start giving Eric Bieniemy some credit because this offense is even better than it was under the prior two offense coordinators.
Oh, let me tell you something. Mahomes is really good.
He's the real deal. So it's not like a Dak situation where he's going to play out of his mind the first year and then he's going to back up. He's Brett Favre kind of guy. He's a gunslinger mentality, the way he can run the ball.
You were a dominant linebacker, a multiple Pro Bowler, a Super Bowl champ with the Patriots, and a linebacker, and you were a vocal guy. You talked, you led. You were Sean Lee. You were directing traffic. Who was the best, not even the best quarterback, who was the best young quarterback you faced where you knew instantly, okay, there's a lot of chatter, he's for real? Who was the star you saw really early? Because a lot of people are telling me all these young guys are great. Mahomes looks different to me. And I like Jared Goff, but he didn't look like Mahomes.
Probably the best young guy I saw in my playing days would have to be Peyton Manning. You knew it right away how good he would be.
Why?
Even though that record. You would play in the game, and you would hear him make all these calls. So the game to him was more mental than physical, and you knew that you couldn't outsmart him from day one.
Day one.
He had that it factor. Now, he couldn't throw the ball. If you got him outside, you could say, oh, I got him. We playing cover two, ball not going across the middle of the day. But if he got you in that dome, he could make all the throws and you were in trouble.
And you could tell it instantly.
You could tell it instantly. Even though they were, bad.
They were bad
early,
first couple of years.
You could tell it with him because he ran and he orchestrated that offense from day one.
Man, if BRYAN COX, you don't mess around with Brian. If you miss practice, Brian doesn't like you.
No.
If you talk, Brian doesn't like you. You'd be tough coach.
Hey, at some point, players play, coaches coach. So you can't sit up here. The other thing about you go back to the OBJ thing. When you look at that interview, how many times did he say "I" in that interview?
I
don't want to be. I don't want to be held back anymore. I want to be great. I want to be. Is it about the team or is it about what you want? And like the interesting thing to me was last week playing against my son's team, Carolina. So I never bring up Carolina. He was happy that they lost because he got his numbers. And he was saying this was the most competitive, this was the best we've been this year. It was all about him getting his numbers. It wasn't about the team winning the game. That's the sad state to me.
You see a very selfish player in OBJ.
I see a very selfish player. Sometimes you get that wolf in that sheep's clothing. He comes and I'm a competitor. I'm competing for the team. I want to do this. But really, when it comes down to it, he wants the numbers so he can say, "Look at how great I am."
Good seeing you.
Nice seeing you.
BRYAN COX, Joy Taylor with the news.
No. Heard on the news. This is the Herdline News.
So, speaking of team player, this conversation keeps me coming up. Struggle of being LeBron's teammate.
Yeah.
The new